This is our 1 to 24 pre-season predictions podcast for League 2, 2023-2024. I'm Ali Maxwell, he's George Elek, heading into our 8th season, covering the EFL on this podcast, George. And wow, this division, this season, looks lively.
It's shark-infested waters, is how I'm describing it. It feels like what we've kind of had in League One over the last couple of years, where there are 5 or 6 teams who can really flex their financial muscles, and I think it's going to be very difficult for everybody else to keep pace, let alone break into that. We've got a couple towards the bottom end of League 2, as ever, who are not in a particularly good place off the field. But certainly, I think League 2 is going to have a global spotlight shined upon it that we aren't necessarily used to seeing.
Yeah, anyone with a modicum of interest in football needs to be keeping a close eye on League 2 this season. I mean, I think there are basically 8 teams who could be brilliant. Then there's about 4 teams that I'm worried about, and then about 12 teams that I'm, I guess, broadly optimistic for, who I think are kind of doing the right things and are on the right path, but who might have quite a lot of traffic in front of them. So without necessarily predicting massive things, it's exciting. Also exciting is to welcome Betfair back as the sponsors of Not the Top 20 podcast for a 3rd year. What does that mean? It means that this podcast will be powering along, as always, this year. Every Monday, every Thursday with the betting show. Betfair's support allows us to do this for a living, providing the best EFL coverage for the fans that deserve it, and we have a serious commitment to do so. Also in written form this year, NTT20.com is going to be the place to be. If you like thoughtful EFL content in your eyes as well as your ears, we've got you covered. I'm not going to go on too much about the newsletter on the 1 to 24s, but needless to say, if you enjoy our work and if you enjoy this episode, then do head to NTT20.com, stick your email address in the box, and I promise you won't regret it. Let's start at the bottom, as always, at George, and it's a team who finished 22nd last year. We got them 24th, Crawley Town.
Yeah, it's this time last year we sat here and Crawley were being widely written off after the new owners, Wagme United, had come in. And I thought the negativity was maybe misplaced. I thought that Preston Johnson coming in, having a background in sports gambling, in my mind, that normally gives you a fairly good idea about what it takes to win football matches. The appointment of Kevin Betsy, I thought, looked pretty innovative, quite exciting. There was a piece up on The Athletic pre-season about how much work was going on behind the scenes and how they were looking to kind of put in Premier League level practices basically into League 2. And I was caught hook, line and sinker, and I was sitting here saying, I think this could be quite an exciting time for Crawley. What has transpired has been quite the opposite. I think it's fair to say that Crawley Town fans right now are more interested in trying to get Wagme United to leave Crawley Town rather than hoping for some kind of a redemption arc coming into this season. The gutting of the players that Crawley fans have long thought to be crucial players to them, dating back to Glenn Morris last season, Tom Nichols as well, has carried on into this summer, really. You look at the departures, Ashley Nadson, another player who's gone on to Gillingham just a couple of days ago. James Tilley, a rare bright spark last season, has gone to AFC Wimbledon. Jack Powell, a creative force in midfield, has gone to Crewe. Aramida Ote, who is again a rare shining light at times, has moved on to Walsall. I mean, they're losing without much of a fight a lot of their best players to fellow League 2 sides. And when you look at the players they're bringing in, now I am absolutely a believer that there is so much untapped talent and potential within the non-league. So when you're seeing players brought in, in their early 20s from Oxford City, from Bromley, from St Albans, I'm from Brackley, I'm absolutely not sitting here saying I don't think they're going to be good enough. But to replace, proven or at least tried and tested League 2 players with a whole glut of non-league players doesn't look to me to be particularly forward-thinking. Liam Kelly's in from Rochdale, who, if you're going to have 70% of the ball, might be a fair signing, but I can't really see how that's going to happen. Scott Lindsay came in last season and did an incredibly good job in difficult circumstances to galvanise the fan base. And I think that is the one thing Crawley have going for them here, is they've got a manager who the fans do want, despite not really wanting the owners in charge. But given where they finished last season, given how it unravelled, and the fact that we're just yet to see. I mean, I know they've brought in Ronan Darcy and Danny Orso from Grimsby and Swindon, but again, these aren't players who've necessarily looked like they are good League Two players. They're players who played League Two football. It's hard for me to find any reason why the downward trajectory they're on won't continue.
I think Jack Powell's a massive loss at the base of midfield, a quality operator for them. And even Ashley Nadesan, such a popular player for so long at Crawley, gives some physicality and versatility at the top of the pitch. He's gone as well. And when you look at Dom Telford, the league's top scorer, not last season, but the one before, I think now we know that Telford can and will score goals and is a quality player, but that he needs someone next to him as foil, someone to occupy defenders, be that physical target, and sort of allow Telford to pick up the pieces and to finish well, which he does. And I still don't think that they've provided that for him, which is frustrating because it seems so obvious. I have all the same concerns as you about their recruitment. Again, non-league recruitment, high risk, high reward, but do I trust them to have the best non-league scouts in League 2 and League 1? No, obviously not. All teams are looking to non-league for talent, and I don't truly believe that this Crawley town, with this ownership group running it, would have the best non-league scouting talent personally. So huge concern for Crawley town, both on the field this season and certainly off it, more sort of existentially going forward. If they do drop out of the EFL, it could be highly problematic for the club and for its future. So definitely something to watch. To an extent, there are similarities with Morecambe FC, who we have finishing 23rd. Now, this would be a double relegation, which we have seen before and in recent history as well. It feels somewhat dramatic to predict a double relegation, but I think there are reasons for it. The first thing to say is just because Morecambe were a League One club last season, I don't think that should be a reason for anyone to think that getting relegated from League Two is automatically not an option. Not only have we seen that before with double relegations from League One to non-league, but also last year's relegated clubs, 4 of them down from League One, finished between 13th and 21st. So clearly for them, it was very difficult to overcome relegation from League One to League Two. The big issue for me here is, again, off the field. It's highly frustrating to be making what are basically footballing predictions and being and feeling like we have to be led by issues off the field and the impact that they have on football clubs and their teams. The ownership situation is very peculiar. The Bond Group Investments company that owns the club, that seemingly have been looking to sell the club and or struggling to fund the club towards the end of last season, which got into a very concerning situation. They were looking for buyers. They were flirting with one buyer in particular. All's gone very quiet on that front. This was a very public potential prospective buyer who had a lot to say and a lot of promises, but given that nothing has happened in terms of that actual takeover, I think we can assume that those promises were not seen to be on solid ground. So although the good news is that Bond Group Investments Limited did announce a support package for the club in May, saying that they can fund the club in League Two, that is a massive red flag, not only because all but half a dozen of their players from last season in League One left and were released from their contracts. So apart from 5 or 6 senior pros, the likes of Rawson and Jacob Badeau, for example, they really have had to build a new squad. And for me, it looks like they've added a lot of either unproven or injury-prone players, or players that I'm afraid I do not believe would have had a huge amount of interest from other League Two clubs. So for me, this is a little bit of a mishmash of a recruitment summer through necessity, because they really needed to build a squad. And Derek Adams is basically going to have to put an absolute masterclass like he did in the 2021 season, taking Morecambe up. There's a chance that he could do that, but I do think that further issues off the field, which is something that I don't think we can rule out at this time, could have a big impact on this football club. And George, we're just not sure about the shape of the squad, even on the pitch heading into this season either.
I've just got no idea where the goals come from as well. When you consider that they've lost Cole Stockton, who has clearly been a transformative player for them in an incredible few seasons, dating back to their promotion out of League Two. You know, their striking options at the moment. You've got Jordan Slew yet again returning from non-league to the club. Charlie Brown, who's really struggled to show any promise since leaving Chelsea. Tom Bloxham, who comes in on loan from Shrewsbury, who's obviously a talent, but beyond that, we haven't seen him be prolific. One big issue for me, and normally it's interesting that we've got 2 teams here at the bottom of League Two, and I think this applies for both, where we can probably say that the manager is a net positive. Yet it's very rare for teams who finish the season in the relegation zone to have started the season with the same manager. And with both Lindsay and with Adams, you have to wonder if it's in their best interest for their careers to stay at these clubs, given what's going on off the pitch. It wouldn't surprise me at all if we see Adams look at this in a couple of weeks' time, especially with the issues in the ongoing takeover sagas and the rest of it, if he just thinks, you know what, I'm better off out of here, and the same to Lindsay too. So when we're both so negative about two teams and you're considering their managers to be probably a positive impact net, then that has got to concern you even further. And
as you say that, Gillingham from last season spring to mind, because heading into last season, we thought Gillingham looked in really concerning shape off the field and in terms of the squad. But Neil Harris was the manager, and there were a lot of people, ourselves included, who consider Neil Harris to be a very good manager in the right circumstances. But we both felt that actually the issues off the field and the lack of quality in the squad would be more of a factor than just having a good manager in the dugout. And I guess Morecambe are the obvious comparison this year on that front. It doesn't seem to me likely that Morecambe would have the sort of angel from above that Gillingham had in January last season, where the new owner came in and funded their turnaround from a point of being bottom of the league on the 1st of January. So we can but hope, but League Two clubs I think find it pretty difficult to find good owners who will take the club forward and be able to fund a club of this size in League Two. Morecambe second bottom. One last thing, I'm very excited about one young player called Adam Mayer, who actually picked up quite a lot of minutes in League One last season. Derek Adams took a real shine to him, and you can understand why. Looks a very, very lively, technical type, but hard working out of possession as well. Lefty, can play any sort of attacking role down the left side, and it would be great if he can hit the ground running in League Two, carve out a position in this team, and show his talent and impact games regularly with goals and assists. It could be someone that we talk about a lot this season. Adam Mayer of Morecambe.
You're looking at the relegation prices for this season with the Betfair Sportsbook. No massive surprise to see Crawley as the favourites for relegation. They're 5-2 to go down. There's been steady money basically all summer for Crawley. And then Harrogate are second favourites, 100-30, and then Morecambe are third favourites, joint with Colchester, who are both 9-2. So if you agree with us, you think those are the two teams who will get relegated, you'll get 5-2 about Crawley and 9-2 about Morecambe, and the double. You can have the double as well, which is just over.
Just above the dotted line, we got a team that finished 15th last season and actually finished well under Graham Coughlin. It's Newport County. The Amber Army looking pretty good in the last few months of the season, but quite a lot's happened since then, and none of it good in our eyes. Firstly, we learned that there's a highly reduced budget for this season. The club, which is one of the few fan-owned clubs in the EFL, announced a big loss and a somewhat surprising loss in their latest accounts. And because it is a fan-owned club, there's no wealthy benefactor to inject money to cover those costs and just march onwards as normal, just sort of forgetting that this is a loss-making football club. No, they need to try and cut their cloth. And I think they're finding it hard to maintain a competitive League Two budget as a result, sadly. They've lost some key players, particularly in defence. Lewis, Demetriou, Farquharson and Cameron Norman, all gone. Dolan as well, a real stalwart over the last few years, not there anymore. And for Coughlin, who I think is a defence-first manager, someone who really relies on strong penalty box defending, relies on his centre-backs to contribute going forward in terms of set-piece goals, where they were excellent last season as well. I'm really concerned that the part of this team that needs to be the best is looking incredibly weak heading into the season. Because they are struggling to compete financially, they need to outperform. They're going to have to battle very, very hard. It's going to be grit and grind, I think, for Newport this season. It's hard to see a lot of goals, a big goal workload for Omar Bogle up front, who again seemed to enjoy playing under Coughlin. It's a third team in a row where we're actually broadly positive about the manager, but we think that other factors make the job very difficult for him. And if Coughlin can't overcome what I think has been a really difficult summer for the club, if he leaves, I'd be really concerned that Newport could get worse and worse, because I think their ability to attract proven League Two managerial talent, which is probably what would be necessary to keep them up if they start poorly, is somewhat concerning. So we've got Newport above Morecambe and Crawley, but certainly fair to say we're still pretty concerned about them. And in 21st?
Crewe Alexandra, who had in terms of the actual league table, a pretty good season last season, finishing 13th on 58 points. I mean, that was only kind of 6 points clear of 19th, so it was incredibly bunched in that bottom end. For me, a few issues here. As regular listeners will know, I am a slave to the data. First time I've said that today, won't be the last. If you look at the XG ratio table from the beginning of February, so after the January window, they ranked second worst. Only Hartlepool were worse than them, and that kind of reflected in anyone who watched their games. Their kind of finishing levels were very, very high. The main benefactor of that, or the person who was scoring a lot of the goals, was Dan Adjie. He has moved on to Leyton Orient. And when you look at their squad at the moment, it's hard to really see where the goals are going to come from. And in Lee Bell, their manager, given that he came in kind of halfway through last season and the kind of data issues I've mentioned there, it's pretty hard to see or to predict at this stage that he looks like a particularly positive force. They've also lost a couple of key defensive players from last season. Rob McDonald and Calvin Mellor have both gone. I do really like the signing of Mickey Dimitri. I think it's been a massive player for Newport over the last couple of seasons, and the aforementioned Jack Powell as well. But having said that, they need to improve. And I think last season was a bit of a false position. And I anticipate that this will be a campaign where Crewe really need to find someone who is going to be able to stick the ball in the back of the net, replace Adjie. I think without Adjie last season, they'd have been in a relegation battle, and I can't see why they won't be this time around.
I like Baker Richardson. I quite like Chris Long. Neither of those have been able to stay fit consistently. It'd be big if they can do that this season. And then, as with Crewe, I think it's always worth mentioning there is a new crop of youngsters. They are not particularly proven at this level, but you have to hope that Lee Bell has plans to build a team just like David Artell did a few years ago, winning promotion to League One. We're talking about Tabiner, Williams at the back, O'Riordan, Adebisi as well, who have all got decent game time, and then some really young ones, Holacek and Finney, that the club have high hopes for. But certainly with you, I'm going to need to see it before I believe it. That's a drop of 8 places. Predicting the same for Tranmere Rovers, who we got in 20th spot in our League 2 1-24s. I mean, my perception is that the fans of the club, and it is a strong fan base for this level, are pretty fed up after a fairly meh few years at this football club. I feel that the fans consider the club to be worthy of a certain amount of investment at this level that they don't think they are seeing. And there are various ways that they have seen this, both in terms of the club's ability to impact the transfer market in League Two over the last few years, which has been incredibly hit and miss, and then equally in terms of some of the managerial appointments, going back to Mickey Mellon for the second time, then after he was sacked, going with the caretaker manager Ian Dawes, who seems like a great guy. And when I listen to Dawes speak about Tranmere Rovers, about what it means to represent that region and the pride that he wants to instill in the fan base, I do find myself, A, wanting him to succeed, and B, kind of buying into it. There is a chance, I think, that he could get things going and get the fan base on side. But I also think a large chunk of them feel like he was the cheap option. And when the fan base feel like that, you haven't got a lot of credit in the bank. You haven't got a lot of time in which to bed in or consolidate or whatever the case may be. So I'd be worried if Tranmere start poorly. Then there's the fact that Dawes likes to play a diamond formation.
You love the diamond.
Yeah, I do.
Dawes diamond.
I love the diamond when Dacres Cogley and Ethan Bristow are the fullbacks, two of the best fullbacks in the division last season, and both have left this summer. I don't believe they've been replaced with obvious replacements that can replicate what they brought the team. And for a manager that likes to play a diamond, that's not ideal. Now, maybe they will move away from the diamond. They've got a few wide players, in particular Morris and Hawks, who, if they could be fit for the whole season, could they produce? Yes. How often have we seen them consistently produce at this level? Not very often. Last season, they signed a load of young players, which didn't seem like it fit Mickey Mellon's managerial style. Now, this summer, they've signed quite a lot of older and, I'm afraid to say, slower players. The likes of Norris, Christian Dennis, Connor Jennings, Regan Hendry. These are all recognisable names for a League Two level, and many of them have had success in the last few years. Dennis and Hendry in particular winning promotion with Carlisle and Forest Green Rovers. But they're all wily and experienced rather than physical, and I think increasingly this is a physical game all across the EFL and in League Two level. So I'm a bit worried that they might be a little bit slow and a bit creaky. So yeah, worried about the fullbacks, worried about the tactics, bit worried about the manager, worried about the midfield, worried about the lack of speed and mobility. Pretty worried. Tranmere, 20th.
Harrogate in 19th, and this is, I guess, is the first one in the league where it's not inherently a negative prediction, I don't think. I think as long as Simon Weaver keeps Harrogate up, he's doing a pretty good job. And it does kind of feel like eventually this has to end in relegation, but I think they've got enough about them to probably stave it off for this year. They've lost Patterson, who is, of course, a massive attacking player for them, but so long as Luke Armstrong is there, you do kind of feel like they have a target man who they can rely on for, at times, goals. He's very streaky, but at least a physical presence up front. I do like the, readers of the EFL Newsletter will know, I like the addition of Abraham Odo a lot, who comes in from Rochdale. I know he divides opinion within Rochdale fans, but I think playing for a Weaver side where we saw at the beginning of last season that he tried to tighten things up for the first time at the detriment to them. And when they became that hectic, free-scoring, free-conceding side later on in the campaign, they were able to pick up the points they needed to get out of the relegation battle. And I think that's the kind of situation that Odo is going to enjoy. He played a lot of football last season at right wing-back. I think he's likely to play at least as a number 10 or up front alongside Armstrong, been given the number 9 shirt. And I think as a young player, he should be a big positive for them. Matty Daly, Matty Folds, after their loan spells, signed on a permanent as well, with McDonald coming in from Crewe. Another good addition. Yeah, so I just think they've made a smattering of nice signings. It's very hard to see or predict that Harrogate will do any better in my mind than safety, and I think Simon Weaver would deserve immense credit if he does manage to get them there, because this is still a pretty small squad, but enough quality running through it and a decent spine, I think, that should mean that they are away from that bottom two.
And will they be the iFollow/highlights team of the season in League 2 again? They had the most combined goals in their games in 21-22, and last season the second most combined goals in their games. It's very, very attacking stuff, very leaky, very, very fun for the neutral Harrogate Town. Above them, I got Wimbledon. They finished 21st last season, having been in League 1 the year before. A finish of 18th this season would be an improvement in the league table. I still don't think it would be necessarily what the fans expect and where they expect to be in this division, but there's a lot of work to do.
Do you think there's a disconnect there between, I think there are a few teams in the EFL where the perception of success and what is success based on where they've been in recent seasons is at odds with the wage bill at hand, the squad, and that makes it quite difficult to align, really, where I think Dons fans would anticipate that they should be pushing to return to League 1. But as we mentioned, given the state of the league, that's going to be quite hard to actually action.
Yeah, but then at the same time, I do consider Wimbledon fans to be among the more sort of understanding and relatively patient fan bases. However, they were served up a horrendous season last season. They've lost Ethan Chislett's probably the main departure. He gets a step up to League 1. For me, he's not necessarily a massively impactful player. He is a moments player. He is a quality technical player, but not someone I think that is going to leave a massive gap necessarily. They've got new centre-backs, new centre midfielders, the centre-backs, Johnson and Lewis, both from Stockport. Centre midfielders, Jake Reeves and Jimmy Ball. They've got new wingers in Tilly and Neufville. It's a nice freshening up of the squad. I think that's been really important after the end of last season. Craig Cope is in helping on the recruitment side. And again, he comes sort of very well regarded. And you have to feel like for Johnny Jackson, at an early stage in his managerial career, having that sort of team around him compared to last summer, we can expect this window, I think, to age a lot better than last summer's window. They've got good options up front. Al Hamadi, Josh Davison, Omar Bugles come in to be a target man, and those guys can play off him. So I do think there is a much higher ceiling than I would have guessed come the end of last season. But personally, it's a case of needing to see it before I necessarily believe it. And because we think the overall level of the league has got stronger, it's difficult for a team, I think, to rise 10, 12 places in this League 2. We're predicting a rise of 3 for AFC Wimbledon, predicting them to finish 18th.
Another relegated side from League 1 now in Accrington Stanley, we've got in 17th. I think the big thing to say here is that without John Coleman, I'd be really worried about them. I think so long as Coleman is there, then they have big credit in the bank. Dropping down a level, even though this is a relegation, he's obviously the man to continue to stay there and has a big positive impact on the whole club. However, when you look at the squad itself, a lot of their best performers last season in what was a poor season were loanees who haven't returned. Jensen in goal, Presley up front, Astley at the back. all either returning to their parent clubs or taking on different moves. There's one story that I really like here where, firstly, Accrington, I do think, there are a lot of clubs that you and we look at, mainly probably in the Championship, we look at their recruitment from Europe, and you don't really have to do too much research where you know that they hit more often than they miss. And I think with Accrington, with PL2 loanees or players picked up from Premier League academies, they generally are pretty high achieving and high performing. And we've seen a few come in here. But there's a centre-back duo, both on loan from Norwich, called Brad Hills and Lewis Shipley, who have played centre-back with each other since they were 9 years old, which I absolutely love.
That's so nice.
So when Hills came in, he was the second. Shipley came in early in the window. Hills came in second, and he said, it makes complete sense because I've been playing alongside Lewis basically all my life. So it's going to be fun.
Shipley was a bit like, for God's sake.
No, I just got rid of him.
I'm trying to get rid of this lad since we were 9.
But I'm not saying, having never seen them play, that this is going to be necessarily like a big win. But I do think there's something in getting in two guys who've known each other for a long time, having their first loans together, going from Norwich to Accrington and playing alongside each other, that is probably a positive impact. Josh Andrews comes in up front, who we've seen with a couple of loans. He's absolutely massive. He showed himself to be capable-ish at Rochdale. Nothing at Donny last season, but a lot of players showed nothing at Donny. And this kind of feels like the kind of John Coleman project that might yield something. So, Coleman is a master. There is still some quality running through the squad. The likes of Ethan Hamilton still there. Sean Wally, they should be okay, you would think. Toby Savin hopefully will get another opportunity to play 40 plus games in goal again, because his career's taken a bit of a dive, a bit of crisis of confidence in the last couple of seasons. Hopefully it'll be good for him.
Can I flag up Rosaire Longello?
Yes.
Who played a lot of games at right wing back last season for Accrington, which, if you watch him play, is quite peculiar. I'm sure Coleman had his reasons, but he's small and he's an unbelievable dribbler and he's left-footed. And I really, really want to see him get a run of games at right wing or left wing, but preferably right wing rather than right wing back. I think get rid of any defensive responsibility for Longello, and he could be one of the best sort of dribbling players in the division and really exciting to watch.
Quite a different profile to their normal left-sided player in Sean McConville.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is quite an intriguing one, isn't it? Because we do worry a lot about teams when they drop down from League One, particularly teams of a certain size and wage bill for this level, where it's hard to imagine them being able to kind of really impact the transfer market. So a lot hinges on the quality, the control, I guess, of John Coleman and Jimmy Bell when it comes to Accrington. We got them finishing in 17th. In 16th spot, we got a team that were in the playoffs 2 years ago, dropped down to 10th last season. We reckon 16th this time around. It's Swindon Town, and another fan base that I do not think would be happy if this is where their team end up this season. I mean, I just find it a bit bizarre, really. Mike Flynn was brought in at the very end of last season. He's had a long time now and a whole pre-season to get his feet under the table, and I guess that's a good thing. But I'm still overall nervous about Swindon. Last summer to be specific, Swindon are completely taken by the idea of using a technical director to oversee things on a football side, to build a modern progressive recruitment system, signing undervalued, underdeveloped players, a lot of young talent, and playing a highly possession-based style of play in order to best develop those players and show them off and sell them on. It is one way of doing things. Whether you think it is the right way or the wrong way, surely if you think it is an interesting option and good enough to give the keys to a technical director like that, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater within 12 months. I do not understand that running of a football club. Within a year, they have completely changed the approach to something that I consider to be about as opposite as possible, which is basically hire Mike Flynn and give him the keys and let him run everything. What does that say about the people running this club at the moment? It doesn't scream conviction to me, and I think that's an important aspect of running a football club. So I'm nervous with what I've seen on that front, and then you realise that because of the way they approached the window last summer, they are left with a very young squad, a squad that is skewed towards technicality rather than physicality, and many of them on contracts that meant that the squad was already pretty full when Flynn came in. So he hasn't really had much of an opportunity to add Mike Flynn players, if you like. And I don't recognise the current squad as a Mike Flynn squad necessarily. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of scope to add more. We've seen Liam Kinsella, who Flynn had at Walsall last season. Murphy Mahoney will be the goalkeeper, replacing the excellent loanee Sol Bryn. And then, of course, Dan Kemp does catch the eye after what he did on loan at Hartlepool in the last few months of last season. But overall, I don't recognise this as an obvious Mike Flynn squad. I'm worried about a lack of physicality for sure. And because of what I said before about the way that the club's being run, where on earth do they turn if it starts poorly? If the club are below expectations, if Flynn is not having as big an impact as they think he might have, what on earth do they do then? On the positive side, there is a pretty high ceiling if everyone stays fit and if Flynn can find a way of getting the best out of a group of players. There's a group of young players like George McEachran in particular, Russian Hepburn Murphy. These are the undervalued, underdeveloped players that were signed over the last 12 months. That's players who are from elite academies that have found it very tough to make an impact in senior football, but who should have the base level talent and quality to develop into good players if they get the mental side of the game right, if they can cope with the physicality of League Two and the schedule, if they can get ready for senior football, which a lot of them struggled with seemingly last season, then there are some quality football players. But the size of the squad concerns me, as does all of the things above. I'm finding everything a little bit awkward and a bit concerning when it comes to Swindon. 16th is where we've got them. We got Sutton United just ahead of them in 15th. They were 14th last season. They tailed off big time after looking solid to start the season. Matt Gray, the manager, is absolute class. I think there's very little doubt about that. He's an incredible manager and has been a fantastic talisman for this football club. I would personally never be too concerned about Sutton United while Matt Gray is still in charge. If he were to leave, all of a sudden I would start being quite worried about Sutton United, if that makes sense. They've lost some key players, Ali Smith in particular from centre midfield, Enzio Boldvine as well, who filled in all over really last season. But I think the recruitment's been nice and targeted and clear-minded, and that's what we expect from Matt Gray and from Sutton over the last few years. Big man up top, Harry Smith, perfect for a direct style of play. 1v1 dribblers, Omari Patrick and Josh Coley, hopefully can stay fit and do what's necessary down the flanks. Craig Clay in midfield adding experience, Ryan Jackson at right back, and Big Omar Sawunmi. I mean, if they don't score 15 goals from set pieces, I'll be astonished, as they got two lads who are 6'6" and bigger. But concerns, well, it's their third season at the level now. It looks like it'll be more of the same in terms of style of play, and there's strength in continuity, but then there's also, will a lot of the other teams be a lot more prepared for what happens when Sutton come to town? Do they need to adapt a little bit tactically? We will find out. I think a lot hinges on the quality of the wide players in this 4-4-2, because if they don't hit the ground running and if they're not performing and providing that individual quality, then I think the team can be a bit one-dimensional in possession, and over the course of the season, that can have a negative impact the longer it goes. So I think anything between basically 12th and 17th is on the cards for Sutton. We've gone right in the middle there. We've gone 15th.
Forest Green in 14th, and it's been just a terrible 15 months for Forest Green. We've seen the promotion side that came up under Rob Edwards picked off last summer, and then the dregs have gone again. We've seen players like Hendry spent the second half of last season out on loan, but Hendry, McGee, Cargill, Stevenson, O'Keefe all going, mostly those players going upwards as well rather than sideways. McGeoch as well, after being a rare bright spark last season. But, it's time, I think. The last years basically resemble performance art in my mind for Forest Green, where you've had going viral over appointing Duncan Ferguson, talking about vegan chips. We had, what I'm going to say is, let's hope the next time a club releases a statement about being the first club to appoint a female manager, she actually gets to manage competitive games rather than being replaced a couple of weeks in. But in terms of the steps that have been made since David Horseman has come in, I think there's some cause for optimism. Horseman comes in as a well-respected coach from a decent level. He's someone who, listening to his first interview, the way he talks about the game, I think aligns with the way that most fans want to see the game being played. He talks about really aggressive pressing off the ball, encouraging his players to be brave and direct, and no blame culture. It's all very progressive, and it all sounds great. If he can actually take a team and turn those words into action, then it should be good to see. I love, unsurprisingly, I guess, because there may be some bias here, but I'm fairly convinced that Matty Taylor is still a League One goal scorer if he played in a team that created chances, which was not the case either for Oxford or for Port Vale last season. I think that if Forest Green can build a kind of a press machine, attacking force around him, and have Taylor as that fox in the box number 9, then I think he should score a lot of goals. And there is quality there as well. Reece Brown still in the team. Got to move to the Championship not that long ago for playing well for Forest Green in League 2. Jordan Garrick, another one who's played very well at League 1 level. Jordan Moore-Taylor, a relic of that good side from previous. And in Ryan Ennis, they brought in a centre-back who, if he can stay fit, is quite clearly too good for League 2, but it's just staying fit that seems to be the issue with him. So I reckon a season of consolidation is probably what is at hand here. Horseman getting his feet under or his hooves, maybe I should say, under the table. It feels very disrespectful because I am excited about what he's going to do. So, Forest Green in 14th after just one of the worst seasons post a title win we've ever seen, but hopefully reasons to be optimistic going forward. They've made good appointments off the field as well, with Alan Steele coming in. The Stevie Grieve experiment last season certainly didn't work, but I do think that it looks like now they're getting back to where they were with Rich Hughes and Rob Edwards. Hopefully Steele and Horseman will be that kind of duo.
George, next up we got Colchester United rounding out the bottom half, finishing 13th, which, I mean, certainly in my eyes is some great optimism, because it's a club that we've been frustrated with over the last few years in League 2, often scrapping around the bottom, often just about surviving and then trying to build again and then being dragged back down towards it. But strong finish to last season, Ben Garner at the wheel. We're buying into it to a certain extent.
Yeah, we saw Ben Garner at Swindon come in, not in similar circumstances, but I guess taking on an underachieving League 2 side and overseeing a massive churn of players. And that's, again, what we're having here. I mean, I've got to say, from a neutral's perspective, to finally see that kind of Dad's Army Ipswich core move on is
amazing that they all arrived together and they've all left together.
So Sears has gone, Chambers has gone, Skuse has gone, Judge has gone, and I think that has to be a positive. I think Chambers is the only one who they may miss, but in terms of, he's 37 years old now. He played a lot of football last season, but the time has come to move on. Junior Shamado is still there at time of recording. It seems eminently likely that he will get a £1 million move at least to Stoke. Summer Ashley had a good season last season, a bit of a breakout season, has moved on to Salford. So they are missing a few from last season, but I do think Garner is an exciting manager to have at the helm at League 2 level. We know that he can create a good side. We saw at the back end of last season that they started to play the kind of football that we're used to seeing a Garner team play. In terms of the incomings, it's a lot of loanees from Premier League sides. It's hard to really get overly excited about any of those because we haven't seen them. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I've seen much of Mauro Banderia from Arsenal, but it doesn't mean I'm not excited to see him. But there's enough quality, you think, in the sides. Certainly Noah Chilvers still being there is a big positive. He's the star boy. And, at the back, they've brought in Yandolo from Swindon, who Garner knows well. Fiacre Kelleher and Connor Hall are a good centre-back duo. There's plenty there, I think, for Garner to work with. Again, transition season, wouldn't surprise me at all if Colchester are a side that we're looking to be upwardly mobile going forward. I don't think they should be having too many issues right now about relegation.
I just like the look of it from a sort of fun perspective in terms of youth development. Cole, you have always been one of the leading lights at this level, and you can argue across the EFL in terms of youth development and providing opportunities and pathways for young players. And that's something that we love. It's something that we really like shining a light on. So it's worth pointing out that I think there's now a decent blend where, Cole, you have what I would consider grown-up centre-backs, Hall, Kelleher, Dallison. They got grown-up strikers in Hopper and Akinde, and then sprinkled throughout the rest of the team, a ton of young talent, hopefully with high potential. So Chamado being the main one who may leave, and then in his place, Noah Chilvers finished really strong last season. Samson Tavide's been given the number 9 shirt. He's probably the one to be most excited about, just because he looks like the sort of proper handful forward player that has a lot of growth, and hopefully Garner can work strongly on the technical side of his game to get him a little bit tighter in possession and in the final moments, because he's the sort of speedy wide forward / number 9 type that can really give defenders a tough time with his movement into the channels. And then Gene Kennedy, we've always heard good things about. Marshall Miranda established himself last season. Al Kazim on the left side of the defence as well. I'm excited about Colchester United, and it feels great to say that.
Me too.
Me too. As I said in the intro, there's like 8 teams I think are could be amazing. Then there's 4 teams I think might be really bad that you've already heard about. And now we're in that group of teams that like I basically like them and I like what they're doing, but I just can't squeeze them any higher.
This is always the part of the table where you'll get people saying to us, 17th? Are you joking? We'll be at least 12th. And it's like, yeah, that can be like 3 points. It's very hard to differentiate between these mid-table positions.
Right, 12th, Barrow. Finished 9th last season, and I like Barrow, and I really like their manager, Pete Wild. And I think they will be one of the most well-coached teams in the division. I've got very little doubt about that. And as I say that, I think last season, the best coached teams in the division, some of them finished in the top 3. So maybe I'm getting this wrong already. If I think Pete Wild is one of the best coaches in terms of setting his team up, and maybe I'm missing a trick having Barrow in 12th. They're going to be quality out of possession. I've absolutely no doubt about that. Their press, their defensive structure is excellent, and I think that comes from good coaching and structure rather than personnel. So the fact that they've lost McClelland, for example, is not a huge concern for me because I think Wild is good enough to build a good defence with basically any personnel, unless it was me and you at centre-back. But the attack was very poor. They were a top half team last season. In fact, they were a top 10 team last season, George. They scored 14 goals less than any other top 10 team last season. They only scored 18 in their last 23 games. The second half of the season, Barrow scored 18 goals. So there's a lot to be done on that front. They've added some bodies up front in the shape of Courtney Duffus, Jamie Proctor, Emile Aqua. Hopefully, one of them at least could catch fire. Worrell has come in from Port Vale, and we know him to be a great crosser of the ball, someone that can create chances with the right targets in the middle. So it looks like that'll be their main approach. Whitfield, of course, was a good creator, also from wide positions last season. Got high hopes for Dean Campbell as well. So overall, I'm really looking forward to watching Barrow play. If they can become a consistent attacking threat, I'd be really, really, really excited. But I'm afraid, as is my normal catchphrase, I'm going to need to see it before I believe it. So that leads us to 11th place, George. We've got Walsall.
I'm pretty positive about Walsall for the upcoming campaign. I mean, with Matt Sadler, the head coach, it's a bit of an unknown. Again, it's very hard to sit here and say we expect him to be a massive positive force, but similarly, we just don't really know. But if you look at the squad itself, I think there is cause for optimism that they can leave a disappointing campaign last season behind them. Looking at the players that they've let go, I think everyone was pretty surprised that Liam Kinsella was just kind of released at the end of his contract. But there were a lot of players in there who have been big players from recently who are still there. Looking at Daniels, Knowles, Hutchinson all still there. Manny Month has gone on, has moved up to League One, but in Priestley Farquharson, I think they've made a progressive signing there. Somebody who's maybe a bit more mobile, can probably play the more expansive way they're going to look to play this season. Danny Johnson's an interesting one where I can't really think of many lower league strikers who are quite as streaky as he is. Streaky Danny, where he had a really good loan spell at Walsall last season, scoring 12 and 22. Went back to Mansfield, who hoped they could kind of capitalise on that, and he barely scored at all. He seems to be a massive confidence player. He seems to be someone who needs to kind of feel comfortable, and I think going back to a club where he's had a decent campaign, going and playing in front of fans who kind of idolised him and wanted him to sign can only be a massive positive. Ryan Sturck is a good addition as well, was really good at Mansfield a couple of seasons ago. In Hussey, they've signed a player who was a massive feature for arguably, well, certainly one of the best League Two sides last season in Stockport. Yes, he's getting on a bit, but being able to play at left back or left side of a three is handy too. So they've made some really good, clever additions in my mind. They've retained some quality. As I say, I think in Knowles and Johnson, they've got a front two there that could be very impressive, and Hutchinson as well. They have a lot of attacking talent and some solid defensive base as well. So I don't think it has to take too much from the inexperienced Sadler to make them into, at the very least, a mid-table League Two side.
Yeah, I'm saying Walsall are the team with the biggest potential range of finishes in my head. From best case scenario, let's say 6th, to worst case scenario, Sadler ends up not being great and the players end up not really meshing and the fans get a bit bored and sad again and then they finish 18th. But let's hope not. That's worst case scenario. In 10th, I got Grimsby Town. We've got Grimsby Town. Grimsby under Paul Hurst, they were I think a really good team last season that finished 11th. And I think the finishing spot somewhat obscures the fact that they had an unbelievable cup run, which took them so far in the FA Cup. They beat so many teams in leagues above them, and I think they expended a lot of energy doing so. They'd already expended quite a lot of energy in their National League playoff campaign months before the start of last season. So it was an incredible and very exhausting, I think, physically and emotionally, 12 months. But an amazing 12 months for Grimsby. An 11th place finish is a great finish, having just won promotion. They also, and this is something that you and I will always make note of, underperformed their underlying numbers in attack and defence. So not only did they let in, through bad goalkeeping, good finishing, bad luck, more goals than you would expect given the level of chances that they gave up, but they also didn't convert their chances in an average manner either. So general consensus would be a little bit of better luck this season, a bit more composure in front of goal, and a change of goalkeeper, which they've done. And you never know, if they hit the same standards, they could be a really good team. They had a great record against top 8 teams last season, which again is the sort of thing I look at for a mid-table team and think, yeah, that probably reflects quite well on you, actually. Like, genuinely competitive against the best teams in the division. And it's a Paul Hurst team. And I think we know what good Paul Hurst teams look like now. Really comfortable out of possession with a reactive game plan. Really good in terms of pressing, but also in sitting deeper and defending deeper when necessary. Good in the press, solid and difficult to beat. However, the big red flag from last season is just how poor they were at 0-0 and how poor they were at home. You know, that speaks to a team that struggles to take the game to the opposition, that struggles to dominate and get ahead and win comfortably. That was what was missing last season. So they've made some big steps to try and change that. A lot of early business this summer with Grimsby. I like, in particular, the signings of Tobias Malaki and Camille Conte, who have both recently been in non-league. Malaki played for Rochdale at the back end of last season. I think it's a strong squad now, particularly in defence and in midfield, and it leads to me thinking they will be excellent out of possession once more. My only question mark is goal scoring. They really needed either better attacking players or, probably more importantly, a better attacking system. And I don't know for sure that we're going to get that. They've signed Danny Rose, Donovan Wilson, Raquel Pike, Abo Issa, Charles Vernam. And I don't think either of us are ready to say those are smash hit signings. We hope that they will be, but at League 2 level, you can never really be sure, I don't think. But I do have a good feeling around the club. And I do think Paul Hurst in this sort of situation is someone to sort of get with, to back. So I could easily see things clicking and Grimsby being involved in a playoff tilt with a roaring crowd at Blundell Park getting right behind them. It's a club on the up, Grimsby in 10th.
In 9th, it's a team, you mentioned that Walsall have kind of maybe the biggest range in terms of where they could be. For me, I think Doncaster have to have that, where I was very, very anti-Doncaster this time last season. I think they made 2 really uninspiring managerial appointments in Gary McSheffrey and then Danny Schofield. It didn't really feel like a whole lot of work or attention was being paid to the football club. And they ended up finishing, despite kind of hovering around mid-table for the most part of the campaign, they ended up finishing 18th. Having a look at their underlying numbers for the season, they were 4th bottom for open play XG ratio. They were just a really bad side, and I think some kind of decent players went through Doncaster last season without really being able to do anything, just because the environment wasn't really conducive to being a good football team. Grant McCann is now in, and that is, in my mind, as big a proven upgrade as you can really get from what they had last season. This is a guy who, you and I, sitting on the podcast 18 months ago, we're talking about how unfair it was that he had been sacked by Championship Hull, who were miles clear of relegation. He had taken them to the title last season, sat by Peterborough when they were just outside the playoffs in League One, doing an okay job. Previously proven, he's just a manager at Doncaster as well, so he's got the relationship with the fan base. I think Doncaster fans basically feel like the best they've had it in the last decade or so was when McCann was at the club, both in terms of results and with the style of football on display as well. So that is a huge upgrade, and for that alone, I think you have to upgrade them in terms of where you expect them to finish this season. The addition of Richard Wood, I think, is a really savvy one, immediately made club captain. I think when you consider that Bobby Faulkner, their 18-year-old centre-back, who really impressed at the back end of last season, is in Joseph Aluwa as well, just bringing in a bit of experience and a bit of know-how is a wise thing for McCann to do, and an ally for him to bring in as well. When you've got Maxwell at left-back and Jamie Sterry at right-back, the defensive line just looks really solid. In midfield, they've got a range of options and a lot of proven quality in there as well, from Broadbent, Westbrook, Biggins. They're not short of options. And then up front, they brought in Joe Ironside, who has proven himself at League Two level in the past. Generally a foil. He scored 14 goals in back-to-back seasons in League One and League Two alongside Paul Mullin for the most part for Cambridge, and then last season alongside Sam Smith.
Can we expect, therefore, that George Miller might benefit a lot? Because he had some good streaks last season, but often looked very isolated.
Yeah, possibly. Or I wonder if it might be Ironside's turn to step up and be the main man. We'll have to see. But we're on the cusp here. I mentioned at the top of the pod that there are some sharks in League Two, and I don't think Doncaster are a shark, but they look to me to be one of those who might be able to swim in these waters without being eaten.
Excellent analogy.
Thank you.
Okay, 8th spot, just outside the playoffs, but very much flirting with them. We've got MK Dons, relegated from League One last season. How do they handle a relegation? That must be up there with about as traumatic and surprising a relegation that we've seen in the last few years. They went from 3rd place in League One to being relegated. They started poorly, and between everyone at the club, they were not able to recover, and that was somewhat surprising. So, some pretty strong action taken by Pete Winkelman was to hire Graham Alexander nice and early this summer. Graham Alexander, on the face of it, not someone that you associate with the sort of style of player that MK have been proponents of over the last couple of years, and spoken a lot about their philosophy and the way that they want to recruit and the way that they want to play. Graham Alexander, by no means known as some sort of caveman manager, but it's fair to say is someone who is a little bit more keen to play the ball long, is a little less keen to play the ball a lot, build up a lot with goalkeeper and defenders. At least this is the case for his last few jobs. So, interesting mini transition here, and they've signed some beefier, sturdier, more experienced types to help balance the squad out a little bit for the hustle and bustle of League Two football. If you think that a big part of MK's problem last season was that they simply couldn't handle the physicality and the physical pressure that teams were putting them under, well then the signings of Gilby and Norman and MJ Williams should help with that. McGillivray in goal as well, I think, is one of the best goalkeeper signings this summer. Should be very, very solid in League Two for MK. They've lost a few bits, but nothing major. And I must admit, I think an 8th place finish in my eyes is a reflection of the fact that I think they've got a really high ceiling. I think if he gets his feet under the table, Graham Alexander, nice and early, and if he can work well with this squad of players, if he can add a steel, a strength and a grit while maintaining the technical level, which should be very high for League Two, then they have a high ceiling, and certainly the highest of all the relegated teams by far. Jonathan Lecco, I think, could be absolutely ridiculous. He was really strong at the back end of last season. League One defenders basically couldn't stop him cutting inside and getting past them, so I'm not sure how League Two defenders are meant to cope. His shooting's a little bit iffy and his decision-making could be better, but I really think he could be an absolute star of the level. Mo Issa is a striker at the moment, scored 23 in his only season in League Two with Cheltenham. Connor Grant, Ethan Robson, Jack Tucker. This is a good team with some good players in it. It just was a terrible sort of the potion last season just didn't work at all. Young players like Devoy and Burns could come on as well, and we hope that they will. But that's the best case, because there's also a lot of uncertainty. What's holding us back, I guess, not knowing if Alexander is going to be a good fit for the squad and for the club. Psychologically, has the club handled relegation? Is that already in the rearview mirror? It's a pure question for me of club mentality, mental strength and composure, and we can't judge that right now until we start seeing the team on the pitch. If that is sorted, and if they're in a strong state, sort of overall, holistically as a club, I think the rest will come, and I'd be excited about that. But enough uncertainty to have them just outside the playoffs, George, which means the right side of the dotted line in 7th.
Bradford. And when you look at Bradford's squad and the manager in Mark Hughes, it's basically impossible not to have them in the top 7 in my mind. But it's very hard to get overly enthused and have them right towards the top end. They were so reliant on Andy Cook last season, where, when you've got a successful team and your 25 goal a season striker is part of that, then it's obviously a positive. When you've got your own fans who are fully aware that you are Andy Cook FC during the course of the season, it's not particularly conducive to a positive, outlook going forward. And I kind of asked myself the question: if Mark Hughes wasn't Mark Hughes, if Mark Hughes was David Horseman, who came in last season with no managerial experience, how would we have judged last season? And I think probably okay. I don't think you'd necessarily be looking at it and thinking, yes, this is a guy who we can really get excited about and be confident that he's going to build a decent side next season. They've definitely got the players. The 1 to 11 is one of the best, at least spines, you'd think, of the league. Cook up front, Smallwood, and then McDonald's come in to replace Adam Clayton, who you think is probably an upgrade. I know Clayton did very well when he came in post-January. And then, Stubbs in particular at centre-back, but they've also got Ash Taylor, Matty Platt. They've got players at centre-back who are going to be decent players for the league, and that kind of runs throughout the whole side. So it's hard to talk them down. I do think by adding Tyler Smith, who had a very poor loan spell where he didn't really play at Oxford last season, but we've seen him score goals at League 2 level before. So at least Cook has somebody in the squad who is an out-and-out goal scorer if they get the opportunities to play. I think Bradford are just very, very solid. They briefly flirted with looking like they were going to break into the top 3 last season, the back end of it. But I think the top end of League 2 looks far, far more competitive this time around. And I think, finishing in the playoffs again for Bradford would maybe have to see some progression in terms of their actual performance level. But I think they've certainly got the squad. And, I guess with Hughes, given that when he came into the club, 18 months ago, it was a new environment for him, he's probably entitled to learn on the job even at the stage he's at in his managerial career.
Into 6th now. And this team were bottom of League 2 on New Year's Day 2023. They finished 17th. It's Gillingham. They picked up the second most points in League 2 from the 1st of January 2023 onwards, albeit they did slow down a little bit near the end. Neil Harris, as we discussed this time last year, had inherited a hot mess that he couldn't overcome. The saving grace was that by the time a takeover happened, and a new owner, an American owner, came in and immediately released some pretty tasty funding for January transfers. The saving grace was that Harris was still there, because a lot of managers may not have been. And when the money came with the takeover, lots of transfers came, and the team got a lot better. So I think they're heading into this season feeling pretty bullish. They haven't lost anyone major, I wouldn't say, from that team last season. They've added Connor Masterson, really, really popular former loanee. They've added Johnny Esther, Johnny Williams, who, when fit, we know his quality as a creator at this level, just has that extra quality that not many at this level have. And then Scott Malone, Max Clark, Shadrach OG, all three of them kind of left-sided defensive types. Be interesting to see if Malone may play a little further forward. Basically, on a positive note, I don't see why Gills will be anything other than incredibly solid and will likely have a very strong defensive record. I think they're going to be really hard to score against. That is a feature of Neil Harris teams, and one that I think we should see continuing. I don't see the tactics changing much. It is a somewhat direct attacking style, and it has been pretty effective, albeit the level of goal scoring wasn't that impressive. It was mainly the defensive record that got them all those points in the second half of that season. With the direct system, you worry a little bit about being one-dimensional for some teams, but with Gills, I'm kind of positive, because even with the height of Hawkins, and he will be the target for a lot of long passes, you've still got, once you've won that ball in the final third, you've got the quality of Johnny Williams and Tom Nichols. And I think those are two of the most creative players in the league. So that gives me great cause for hope. You've also got the box-crashing legs of Lapsley running in behind. You've got Dieng, who can be a goal threat arriving late into the box as well. Sean Williams at the base of midfield, a classy operator. So I'm not sure they're going to be a high-scoring team. But if you look at the top 3 in League 2 last season, they only scored 61, 61 and 62 goals in 46, which is not particularly high-scoring return. So, interesting. I think there'll be some that think having Gills in 6th is quite low due to the back end of last season. I think for us it's about right, considering the teams that we have above them. And I also think 17th to 6th, let's remind ourselves, would be an amazing leap. And it's great to see this club with some proper momentum and some good vibes. Gills in 6th.
Welcome to Wrexham in 5th. And, this is a case where I think this is a fairly positive review, really. You have to go back to 2015, 2016 for the last team who have won back-to-back promotions from the National League through to League One. That was Bristol Rovers. So we've seen Salford come up and try. We've seen Stockport come up and go close last season, but it hasn't been done for a while. And what that leads to is the fact that there are now a glut of these high-achieving, high-income, high-spend National League sides, of which the top 5 of our predicted League 2 table are in there. With Wrexham, I've been pretty surprised to see their summer and the way that it's gone. I think we all probably anticipated that we would see quite a lot of spend given what's happened in the last year or so. Instead, they brought in Will Boyle, who I think is a really, really good signing for League 2 level. There's a reason why he got a move from League 1 to the Championship. I don't think there are many sides in League 2 who could have attracted him. He hasn't played a lot of football recently, but even so, he's a good addition. Having said that, they are absolutely stacked at centre-back already with players who performed incredibly well last season, such as Owen O'Connell and Ben Tozer, Jordan Tunnicliffe as well. So how they're going to wedge all those into one team, I'm not entirely sure. But I think it's fair to say that this hasn't really gone to plan in terms of additions being made. Nick Powell was one they were closely linked to. He's gone to Stockport. At the moment, it's James Norwood who's been linked to, but reports in the local press suggest that link might be a little bit premature. I do wonder if, because of everyone's knowledge about Wrexham and their financial security, if that's meaning that it's kind of hard to get deals over the line. They have got a massive squad already. They don't necessarily need reinforcements. They were quite clearly an incredible National League side last season, winning the league with whatever it was, 109 points. A couple of things though. Firstly, Phil Parkinson is their manager, and that I'm not saying is in any way a negative. I think we've seen Parky be a really good manager in various different situations. Last season it was being a flat track bully, and he was very good at it. He had one of two of the best squads in the whole division by miles and was able to turn that into a functional, attacking, free scoring side. We also saw him in a very different situation take a Bolton side who were having serious off-field issues without much investment and take them up out of League One. So he isn't necessarily just a flat track bully, he can do it both ways. But the job that this most resembles in my mind is the Sunderland job, where he's managing a side who have massive expectations, seemingly regardless of the opposition they're going to face in the league that season, with a huge expectant fan base around that as well, and quite a lot of pressure to succeed. And we saw at Sunderland that did not work well at all. As things started to get worse, he became very abrasive. There were cameras in his face quite a lot of the time, which is going to be the case here too. And given the reach and the wealth of Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, it seems to me to be a matter of time until there is somebody more marketable being manager of Wrexham that isn't Phil Parkinson. Whether that is a former elite level player, I mean, I don't know who it's going to be, but I wouldn't be amazed if this journey ends in Wrexham getting up to the Championship or the Premier League. I'll be amazed if it's Phil Parkinson who gets them there. So there is that, where we might see some instability possibly at some stage during the season. As I said, I don't think this is necessarily a particularly negative review. I know that some Wrexham fans around the globe will see it as that and will think that they are, because they are favourites to win the league, should be judged as so. Paul Mullin obviously has his punctured lung, which isn't ideal to start the season with your main striker being out. They've also spent I don't know if they're back from America yet, but the season starts in 6 days, so I hope they're not going to be too jet lagged. It doesn't seem like a great prep for a League 2 campaign. And if one of these two teams coming up from the National League might have some teething issues, I think it could be Wrexham.
Okay, above them in fourth, we got Mansfield Town. And one of the fun aspects of doing these now for 6 or 7 years is that through the very nature of predictions, there are a couple of teams across the 3 leagues that we've got a bit of a history with. And I'm talking about a history of not necessarily getting it right with them. Stoke City spring to mind in the Championship. Mansfield Town spring to mind in League 2. I'm not sure we've ever had them lower than probably 4th, and that's where they are this season, even though they missed the playoffs last year, finishing 1 point outside of it. I don't think either of us were expecting them to have Mansfield 4th, so this is one of those fun ones that you get when you do a lot of pre-season research, and eventually you look at the league as a whole, you feel like you've got a good grasp of the whole league, and you still come back to the Stags being very strong. Now, they were very strong last season for like 75% of it. For 25% of it, Mansfield defended like idiots. They defended like they weren't taking things seriously enough, and they paid the price. There were too many games where they conceded 2, 3, 4 goals. You can't do that. You cannot do that, even if, as they were, they were the joint highest scorers in the league. So it's 2 years now, really, of being occasionally very inconsistent at the back. And I just think the key question is that an unshakable trait? I don't think it is. I still believe in Nigel Clough, and I still think if he can get a settled back four or back five that get a proper run of games together, there's no reason why Mansfield couldn't be a decent defensive team again. He's gone for new faces in searching for this. George Williams, Callum MacDonald, Aaron Lewis, Bailey Cargill, and the returning goalkeeper, Christy Pym. Can they just stay fit and settled? If they can, we're thinking big things for Mansfield. The other end of the pitch is so exciting. As I mentioned, joint top scorers in the league last year, the highest expected goals, the highest open play expected goals alongside Salford. They've got an unbelievable squad. It's not a surprise that they're so good going forward. Their midfield options, Reid, Hartigan, Quinn, Clark, Maris, Boateng, ridiculous midfield depth. Ahead of them, Keeler Dunn, Reece Oates. Swan has joined permanently from Nottingham Forest. His goals per 90, mainly off the bench last season, was the top in the division. Then there's Lucas Akins, target man type, brilliant bouncing passes off Akins. Not known as a prolific goal scorer, but has scored a lot of pre-season goals, I've noticed. So there's a lot to like going forward, and we think they'll tighten up enough at the back to be challenging for automatic promotion, but just missing out. I still rate Nigel Clough as a good manager. We think the squad is amazing. Just get a bit more serious at the back, and they'll be back in the mix. Mansfield fourth, and above them, George, their fellow joint top scorers from last season.
Yeah, Salford, who, I'm really surprised to see, and this will be a theme if anyone tunes into our betting show later in the week, I'm sure, unless things change dramatically until then. I'm amazed to see that Salford are kind of being perceived as, outside of this main core, where you look back to last season, it was Neil Wood's first campaign in charge. I think there may be some complacency where people seem to forget that Salford are still absolutely one of the big spenders in this division. Still massively ambitious as well. The kind of figures stack up last campaign, where I think they were fourth for XG ratio in the whole division last season. They went toe-to-toe with Stockport, who were the best team according to the XG ratio stuff in the playoff semi-finals and were undone on penalties. They have retained key players, which I think you can always be fairly sure that Salford are going to do. Elliot Watt, in my mind, the best centre midfielder in the league, is still there. Callum Hendry, who finished the season brilliantly, also still there. I think Curtis Tilt is a nice addition at centre-back. We saw him playing for Wigan in that promotion season a couple of seasons ago at League One and was very good. Summer Ashley, a nice one to add some energy in midfield too. There's just nothing really negative has happened there, apart from losing Ibu Toure to Stockport is the only negative you can kind of point at. But in Luke Garbett, they've got a left-back who in my mind kind of suits the way they want to play in better, where he is very tidy on the ball. If Matt Smith is up front, he has a brilliant delivery from the left-hand side. I find it very hard to pick holes in this side at all. I think Wood, especially after his first season, is a good platform to work from here coming in. As I say, the squad is littered with quality. We know they have the financial clout to continue to improve. And after a playoff campaign last season, it wouldn't surprise me at all to see them go one better and finish in the top three.
Salford, top three. It's what they've been, favourites for the last seemingly 4 seasons. And rarely have they even got particularly close. And then just when everyone seems to have forgotten a little bit about Salford, we've got them in the top 3.
Yeah.
Great narrative.
Why are they being forgotten?
We never forgot about Notts County. When they went down from League 2, they were in horrendous shape. We were worried about them. Fair to say now we are super excited about them. We got them in second spot in League 2. Straight up from the National League, straight into second spot. I'm excited for literally everything here. I can't really contain myself. I'm excited for Luke Williams' style of play. They averaged just under 70% possession last season. They scored so many goals, 40 goals from open play for their striker, Macaulay Langstaff, who's still there. Ridiculous technicality to their play. Great passing moves. I'm so excited for who they've replaced Ruben Rodriguez with. David McGoldrick was one of the best players in League One last season, is a forward player who scores goals, creates goals, and can carry the ball. You basically can't tackle him because his feet are so good. That's 2 strikers in one, or 2 number 10s in one, and he'll be playing in the 10 role behind Langstaff. Maybe Dan Crowley will be there as well. beautiful technician and seems to have been able to get himself fit back end of last season playing for Morecambe. I'm so excited for those two. George, the team got 4 points less than Wrexham last season, therefore had to go up through the playoffs. They scored one more and conceded one less in the regular season. I guess I'd throw it to you and say, because I'm clearly just a little bit blinded with love here, with black and white love. On a serious note, why have we got Notts specifically above Wrexham to this extent, having finished beneath them last season?
There's a couple of interesting things to look at here. Firstly, and this is, apologies for those who don't care about the betting side of things, but kind of some betting theory where these two teams played, Wrexham and Notts County played very late on in the National League season, and Wrexham went off. I should say credit to Nick Goff for this because he was the one who filled me in rather than passing off as my own. But Wrexham went off 6-4 favourites at home to Notts County, and that basically translates that if they were to play at a neutral venue, because that was at Wrexham, then Notts County would have been slight favourites. So you had there kind of an indication on, from the markets at least, that Notts County were probably being perceived as a slightly better side than Wrexham, regardless of what the league table says. Now, I know that a lot of Wrexham fans will say, hold on, we won the league, and I get that, and, whatever, like it's a couple of points over the course of a season.
Yeah, you might not like listening to this podcast long term.
It's not. It's not. If finishing above a team the season before was cast iron evidence you'd finish above them again, then things would be very, very easy to predict. As you say, they've made some really good additions. I think the McGoldrick Crowley combined radar would basically be a ball player's circle. Like it's ridiculous what those two will bring in terms of attacking talent. I've often been critical of Crowley. I think he or his agent have picked some really bad moves for him in the past, and he's finally now going to go to a club where they're going to dominate possession. He's going to get on the ball in advanced areas a lot and is going to be encouraged to express himself. The only concern I have around Notts County is in their keeper Sam Slocum, who is very good at the ball playing side of things that Luke Williams wants him to be, very brave on the ball. I'm not necessarily sure he's a great shot stopper. I do wonder if at a high level with a better opposition, he might be caught out a little bit in that regard. But generally, this is a squad with bags of quality. And I think in Luke Williams, now that he's back in the EFL, I don't think it's going to be long before we're touting him for jobs up in the Championship and beyond, because he seems to have it, whatever it is.
Love that. Top of the table. Top of League 2 in this year's 1-24s. You've probably guessed by now. Stockport County. George, Stockport finished 4th last season. But, and this could be interesting and relevant to Notts County and Wrexham, they struggled for the first 10 games. They didn't hit the ground running despite an incredible National League campaign the year before. If you take out the first 10 league games of last season, convenient, I know. Once they got to grips with things, Stockport picked up 71 points from 36 games. That's 8 more than any other team in that time period. So all 3 teams that went up automatically, and Carlisle who went up through the playoffs in terms of league points return over basically everything other than the first 10 games of the season. Stockport were very much at the same level. In fact, it's easy to argue better. They're now acclimatised to League 2, George, and that should be pretty scary for everyone else.
Yeah, I definitely think it should be. It was, as you say, it took him a while to get used, to bed into League 2 last season. I think maybe, as we say, the expectation and pressures coming into the campaign as favourites maybe didn't suit them. But they were a magnificent side last season. It was a weird playoff final where something just didn't quite seem right about them on the day. But we know that they've got a manager in Dave Challoner who is going for 3 consecutive promotions. So there's no issues there in terms of their ability to see things through and get over the line. I think the additions that they've made, it looks like they're going to be changing shape this season. I think they're going to be playing a back 4, which is no bad thing when you consider the quality that they've brought in. Nick Powell should be one of the most effective players in League 2 this season. Again, I wrote about him in the EFL Newsletter. Early season or pre-season suggestions he might be playing as an attacking midfielder, which is fine. I think he'll play quite a lot of the season up front as well, where his aerial dominance will be massive. They've also brought in Louis Barry, who had a brilliant campaign last season at Salford, who I think will really suit this kind of direct attacking Stockport side. Basically, they were the best team in my mind, and I know, again, apologies to teams that actually went up, but they were the most impressive side, especially in open play last season in League 2. And if it wasn't for a poor start, they'd have comfortably finished in the top 3. and I see no reason why they won't hit the ground running here and put that right and finish top of the league.
Last thing, if you're interested in managers, let me tell you a bit about Dave Challoner, Stockport County manager. He's an absolute winner. His first job was with Colwyn Bay, 1 promotion. Then AFC Fylde, 3 promotions and a National League playoff final and an FA Trophy win. Hartlepool, promotion, first full season. Then had 23 points from their first 14 games in League 2 seasons ago before he left to join Stockport, where he won 24 games out of 31 in the league at a ridiculous 2.39 PPG and 1 promotion. Then last season, finished 4th placed, lost a playoff final. Challoner's a winner. We think Stockport will be the winners of League 2. George, do the Betfair promotion odds suggest that we are in line with them?
Not with Wrexham, who are 7-2 favourites, but Stockport are second favourites at 6-1. Notts County third favourites at 15-2. So we're not going massively against the grain, although Salford 16-1. They are to win the league. In terms of promotion odds as well, or top 3 finish, you got Stockport 2-1. Notts County 9-4, Salford 5-1, top 7 finish. So the other teams we had in there as well. Bradford we've got at 11-10, Mansfield at even money, and Wrexham 4-11. The other side, Gillingham are even money. So you can see then in terms of promotion itself, Stockport 5-4, Notts County 13-8, and Salford 7-2.
We are genuinely so excited for League 2 this season. It's going to be absolutely excellent. I've got so many teams that I need to go and see in the flesh. I'm off to Sutton against Notts County, opening day of the season, to see this Luke Williams side in the flesh, the team we have second in our 1-24s. Make sure you listen to the 1-24 episodes for the Championship and for League 1 as well. Massive thank you to Betfair for their continued commitment and support to this podcast, a 3rd year in a row that we'll be partnered with them and providing you guys with the best EFL audio content that we can possibly muster. So do join us for the journey. And if you've enjoyed this and you like reading, head to NTT20.com, stick your email address in the box, and you can sign up to either a free subscription or a paid subscription if you really want the whole hog at early bird discount prices. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy the start of the season. Let us know what you think on Twitter at NTT20pod, and go well.